So, guys, I want to talk about AEW last night, and I want to mention that I've been having an issue the past three shows of actually like passing out and falling asleep. And I do blame that, on a personal issue, like where I work the night shift. And sometimes when I'm like laying in bed and watching something, my body almost has like a response where I just turn over and fall asleep automatically. Like your body's almost like saying, I want to do this instead of just I'm trying to control it really. But it is very telling if we watch a television show and it is putting us to sleep. So the first thing that I want to say is that I'm very disappointed with AEW because they've not been building any matches to AEW Double or Nothing. This is one of the big shows of the year. In my opinion, it's very similar to a Slammiversary for TNA Wrestling or like an anniversary show because I believe Double or Nothing was their first pay-per-view. I know All In's like their WrestleMania, but this is one of the big four pay-per-view. You only have two matches announced. And like I've said many times with AEW, if they shoehorn like 10 matches on the card, really, it gets to a point where, if it's done like automatically or it's done like a week before, it doesn't feel, it doesn't have the same like kick really. Usually when they spend a couple of weeks building to matches, that's when they actually have something great. And I did a fantasy booking video, but I want to talk about the show. So that was one of the big weaknesses. They didn't add any more matches. So the first one was the 8-man tag team match, and they did this thing where they did like elbow drops and they kept missing, and then they did this thing where they kept slapping Ricochet on the head for being bald. So you kind of saw that typical thing with AEW and the Young Bucks where they kind of do dumb comedy spots, and it wasn't really, it was really off-putting because it's just like, they have to incorporate the silliness. And I think with Ricochet, he could be a serious, jerky, narcissistic heel, like a very douchebag. And I think that when you always make fun of the fact that he's bald, you kind of make him, it becomes like the Conway Twitty gag, where people may laugh at it, but then it just gets a little old. Or sometimes it makes him kind of come off more dorky, instead of actually, like a heel that you can take seriously. So you have to kind of, just say, okay, like lessen that a little bit more. And then also the Young Bucks, again, they had like that comedy stuff, like honestly, when everybody's trying to do elbow spots and they're missing, or they're slapping Ricochet in the head, really, again, it just feeds into dumb, dorky comedy. Aren't they trying to make an impression to the Death Riders? So why are they trying to be, kind of like silly, really? And then also you had Okada get the pinfall on Mark Briscoe. Mark Briscoe usually loses, and, Okada needs to look strong. So I kind of said to myself, it was predictable, but it's okay if Okada actually gets a pinfall because you have to make sure that he matters. I know they're trying to build up to All In where it's Kenny Omega versus Okada. The next match that you had, I believe was the Ops versus a bunch of jobbers. Obviously, the Ops are going to win. You had the Ops get attacked by John Moxley. They're setting up a cage match between Moxley and Samoa Joe for the Chicago show. And then this is kind of one of the issues with AEW is that you have Double or Nothing, but you're really focused on doing a couple of summer shows. Like you just had a summer show last week in Boston. Now you're doing a summer special in Chicago. And you're doing a summer special in Portland, Maine. Portland, Oregon, if I'm correct. And you're doing a summer special in Washington State. And then you're also doing a summer special in Chicago, if I'm correct. Then you're doing a Grand Slam show in Mexico. So you have to be really careful with this oversaturation of special shows. That's the other thing, too, is if you overdo it, it's not special at all. And then when you have pay-per-views, like Double or Nothing, it's like, okay, you're putting all the good matches or the must-see matches on television. But I do understand that once in a while, you need to have like pay-per-view level shows to make sure the viewing experience is great. But AEW really overdoes that. So, again, like I've said, that I'm happy that we're leading to a story, and I think that at the Double or Nothing, they're gonna do like they're probably gonna do like Blood and Guts instead of Anarchy in the Arena, because I think that's what they're trying to set up really. But this is bad as well, really, because um, you know, Blood and Guts takes place in a cage, really. So um, Anarchy in the Arena is something that people pay to see, really. So if you're not going to do it this year, or I feel like you're trying to set up for Blood and Guts instead of Anarchy in the Arena, I just think that it's bad because you're changing the tradition, really, and you're not really like advertising it. So I really think Double or Nothing is going to be a show that's going to feel like a loss, really. The next thing that I want to say is that um, they had Tony Storm versus a Japanese wrestler. I don't remember her name, but I didn't watch that match because obviously Tony Storm's going to win, and they're doing this championship series where it's like you have to beat her twice to become champion. So, like I've said, I don't understand why they're doing this. I think that she can do an open challenge, or you could say, hey, you know what? Let's get Tamina Shirakawa versus Tony Storm at Double or Nothing. Or we can do Athena versus Tony Storm at Double or Nothing. And then if Athena wins, you turn it into a triple threat with Mercedes at AEW All In. Winner take all the titles. So I think that would be better, really. But also, why would I want to watch this match? Because more than likely, Tony Storm's going to win everything. So it becomes predictable. You did Nick Wayne versus Jay Lethal. I'm very upset that I missed out on this match. And what I would say is that I like Nick Wayne's character. I think a lot of people are kind of growing on him because he has the hot mom. You kind of see Christian being a jerk to him. And I think with Nick Wayne, there's like that underdog type of character to him. And I think that putting a title on him helps so he doesn't feel like he's there. He's actually done a lot of work in Ring of Honor, so he doesn't feel kind of shoehorned. He feels like he took a lot of time to kind of grow and really earn his stripes, really. So he's getting over with the crowd, really. But I also think that another thing is that he's been on the roster for like a little bit over a year, so he's starting to become more regular. He doesn't feel like, oh, well, like a little out of place, really. So I like that. The next thing is that you did MJF and Bobby Lashley, and they kind of did a good segment, but I want to see MJF versus Lashley at Double or Nothing. I think that that'll be a great match. They have a regular match, but MJF wins. He joins the Hurt Syndicate, and then you could do a rematch where he messes it all up, really. And then you do Bobby Lashley versus MJF in like a bloody like match type of thing. That'll be the way to do it. And then you had Kyle Fletcher versus and then you had like Kyle Fletcher versus he did something with FTR, and I don't remember what that was really, but I think what some people were saying was that there are people in the background, like someone who's acting like a mime or whatever, and was trying to make it a little silly. And with FTR, they're trying to be douchebags, but they're also doing like just like dorky comedy type of thing. So it's like stop that. Where you need to take yourselves more seriously. And then it's also the other thing was that you had a main event between Kyle Fletcher and Adam Page. Like I've said before, that I do not like how they're booking Kyle Fletcher. He has a lot of potential. He could be a major heel in WWE. He can even be like, he and Randy Orton can even become a tag team of top heels. But the thing about it is Kyle Fletcher and the Downcast family are really the Will Ospreay jobbers. They'll always lose to Will Ospreay, and they'll always lose to anybody. Like they always lose. They lose all the time, except for when it's not. It's almost like if Will Ospreay has to win something, or you want a dream match between somebody and Will Ospreay, Kyle Fletcher has to lose, and everybody else has to lose, really. So they're basically the Will Ospreay jobbers. And I also will say that during the match, I didn't like the part where Kyle Fletcher is kind of doing like a horsey ride to Adam Page, because there's two things about it. That number one, I'm not sure if Kyle Fletcher is gay or if he's metrosexual, but that's a bad look because, coming off as a creepy gay man, we need to break those stereotypes, especially in a world where there's transphobia and a lot of LGBTQ phobia. So doing that um, is bad because you're living up to the predatory gay man stereotypes. And then the other thing too is that um, sexually creepy or sexually flirty, um, like a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. So I wonder, you may do something where Kyle Fletcher does that to a fan or whatever and makes somebody uncomfortable. So you have to be a little careful when you have sexual harassment humor in any type of segment. So I think that he shouldn't have done that. And it goes down to what I said about Kyle Fletcher, that he does have a bad habit of acting comical. And this is one of the comedy things that actually take away from him. But they had a great match. They did pile drivers. They did a lot of spots that showed that these are two wrestlers that are very gritty and vicious. And they're like, two pit bulls. They're just really like hard hitting brawler type of wrestlers. Like they know how to pick the right style. They could be high flyers, but they picked the more brawler style because that worked really. There was a spot where Kyle Fletcher got hurt outside the ring and he had like a cut on his back really, and that kind of looked really messed up really. But he did a great job just working through the match. But like I said, I think that you need to make Kyle Fletcher the TNT champion. I know Adam Cole has got that for possibly a month really, but you get more longevity if you give the Kyle Fletcher. But overall, it was an okay show. I did have to watch some of it at work after I fell asleep. But as I said, it is definitely sleep inducing. And I think some of it is just really repetitive. And I'm kind of said too that whenever I see an 8-man match, I will not really care about it because that's just too many people to focus on. And all that stuff really. But I also will say that Mike Bailey and Kevin Knight need to become a tag team. And I think they'll be really successful. And I also was saying too, there should be like a fatal 4-way match for the women's TBS championship for like, a special really. And also I was saying something like, you need to, I didn't see anywhere on the show they mentioned that AEW Grand Slam was sold out. What the fuck, AEW? Wouldn't you want to promote good news like that? Saying, hey, we're going to a 12,000 seat arena or a 16,000 seat arena in Mexico, a country we've never been there before, and we just sold this place out, really. Like, what the fuck? You need to be smarter than that. And like I said, they have 6,600 people, if I'm correct. I think there's 6,000 or 6,600 people for AEW Double or Nothing in a 20,000 seat arena. So part of it is them not emphasizing matches and feuds going into that. They need to go all out, really. They just they need to put their best foot forward with everything that they're doing, really. But it's not putting their best foot forward when you have one of your big four shows in 3 weeks from now. It's going to be 2 weeks next week, and there's only 2 matches announced. So they're starting to drop their pay-per-view quality, and it doesn't surprise me why they're going to have arenas that are like 33% full or whatever. So they need to do better with that, and they need to start building to matches. And I also am happy I'm doing fantasy booking videos of suggestions of matches that they can have and some storylines that they can build. Like, honestly, Collision also needs to matter. They need to build to some pay-per-view match through Collision. I also feel they need to have the Ring of Honor title defended on some pay-per-views just to be like, hey, it has to matter outside of Chris Jericho when Chris Jericho doesn't hold it and all that stuff. So it was definitely a very problematic show, and it did put me to sleep, really. So, I hope that AEW gets better